everyone, this is Shadow788 here. So, I would like to welcome my newest subscribers, and as you guys can tell from the caption of the video, we're going to be talking about the word fat, the other F word. So without further ado, let's get this started. So I want to start off basically talking about the word fat itself, because it's just an interesting thing when you think about it, that its definition is mostly referring to a compound that we need in our body, which is an organic molecule that is soluble in solvents and insoluble in water, which basically means that rubbing alcohol can dissolve fats or oils and it will not disperse in water. So, but yet the use of this term as an adjective just for anyone is almost just as bad as the F-bomb. And I say that because it's like, there's a lot of obesity in the world, but you can almost call anybody fat, and it was, even if the person wasn't fat, they still feel like they got shot in the face, because it's no longer the term for the actual description of a compound that we have in our bodies. It is now described as the way a person looks, and it's almost an equal value to using the term ugly, if not heavier, because someone can argue I'm not ugly because of whatever reason, but for some reason people just automatically have trouble not denying the F word, fat, because they will find something. And the reason being is that we are not stick figures, so somebody that is healthy standing, even if they are underweight by the BMI index, that they're gonna find little soft bits on them and they're gonna say, like, well, I'm fat. And it's like, no, you have flesh on your bones. There's a difference. Now let's think about this this word that as it's evolved through the ages. So let's just go back as far as we can, and from some research that I've done just briefly on it, I would like to try and look more into this, but for now I just want to start talking about it. That the earliest known records of talking about people fat or being obese actually causing health problems goes back to Socrates and other people during the 6th century describing the health problems with it, and them identifying that being overweight or exceedingly obese is not a healthy thing and will cause you problems. But you also have to know that during those times, if you were a fat person, you were very well to take care of yourself. You never went hungry, which that was certainly a big main concern of everyone surviving at the time, was whether or not you had shelter and food and water. If you don't have those three things, you're basically dead. So let's go a little bit forward into the Middle Ages and the Renaissance in Europe, which is where we see most of the heavy-set obese people that we've seen in history, and it was very common among officials and people in high society because they could afford to eat. And it's also during the time of Christianity starting that they started seeing this behavior as gluttonous and looking just negatively on somebody that was healthy or heavy or whatnot, seeing them as having an excess and just being greedy and sinful. And even characters in Greek comedy actually came up as Obesus, that was an actual heavy set man that was sloth and gluttonous and a comedic figure, and it was already kind of made fun upon in the early ages. But it's also the fact that they were considered higher society, so I of course would make fun of rich people during that time when there was very few people that were well-to-do back in the day, like hundreds of years ago. And now today we see people that are of the heavier stature or fat as being, the modern world seeing us as being unattractive and stereotyping us in negative applications. And it's also considered today that many people that have obesity or are overweight are also going to be victimized of discrimination, not only in their day-to-day lives, but even in the employment world. I myself have had a few concerns with applying for a job, and you have to be physically active as a zoologist. I understand that, and I am physically active. I've done scuba diving, I've dove 111 feet, I've been in high swells, I've been in hail, I've been diving at night. I am physically capable of scuba diving, but I don't want to be in a situation where an employer is looking at me, looking at my size, and judging for himself that he believes that I cannot do it because I am heavier than some other people. That's the main thing I'm concerned about, and I'm sure a lot of people are probably in the same predicament as me, is that you have a particular skill set and maybe your size is a little bit larger than what you would expect for that field. But here's another example about modern, like the changes that have accumulated in terms of body image over the last several years. There was, they actually did statistics on Miss America pageants from the 1920s to 2000. The height of pageant attendees increased by 2%. 2% in from the 20s to 2000. So that's maybe about 80 years or so. But that same period of time, their weight decreased by 12-13%. That's a little big difference if you really think about it. Their height increased by 2% over 80 years, but their weight decreased by almost 12%. So now that we've kind of overviewed the history lesson a little bit into the modern era, I want to also take on another subject in terms of arts. And everyone has seen Renaissance art, or at least some form of art from maybe the 1600s. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Rubens as a painter, but he made the Three Graces. That really is a popular one that most people have seen, even though they didn't know what it was they were looking at. And you would say in modern perception that those women are obese or are fat. So, but when you think about it, during that time, it was scarce, and the women in the painting are probably of higher class standing. So it would be difficult to argue that. Hold on. So it would be difficult to argue the idea that indeed these women are beautiful, and many people during that era when these paintings were made would strive to be that shape, because that is a sign of health and fertility and success. But it would be easy to demonize them because of the fact that they were living in excess, and when you're struggling as an individual and you can't be, and you're not successful. So I wonder if our honest discrimination of just people's size is actually carried on through the centuries, and the fact that the hatred at fat people isn't really necessarily, well, current today it's a bully thing, but it started out as just somebody just kind of hating other successful people. Now, of course, my opinions are open to discussion, but I'm trying to really think into this a little bit. And then some people ask, like, well, it's grotesque, or it's like, it's just kind of gross. It's like you want to have someone with a smooth body type or something. It's like everyone has their own particular taste. The painter Rubens was well known for painting larger women, and in fact, the Three Graces weren't even his largest women that he painted. And he even goes into that, even though these women are of heavier stature, they're also argued to be hourglass, but to me, it's like they're natural. They're human. They look like real women. You can see some of their actual curves, but you could also see where they're filled out. And you also got to remember, during that time period when he was painting these women, they didn't have as constrictive clothes at that point. It's like, I don't think until, I can't remember the date, but women's bodies forms didn't really get that deformed until they started really getting into corsets. And right now, our bodies are somewhat deformed by their shape by jeans and other constrictive clothes like belts, and that's why a lot of heavy people kind of have like this dual bulge in the front, and it's because you're squeezing into clothes that you can't fit into. So if we had robes like the Greeks wore, and we slowly put on our weight, we would be smooth relatively all over. We wouldn't have the rolls, I guess, as it were. Sorry, I had to turn off my heater. It was starting to get too warm in here. So I want to continue on with this topic, thinking that through time and space, at least for humanity, there is always something to antagonize, just kind of to demonize. And it's it's easy to demonize something because in a way some societies need something to demonize, I guess. And in modern culture today, it's easy to demonize fat people because people can assume like, oh, that person's not taking care of himself, they're a slob, they're lazy. They can make all these assumptions. Just like I can make assumptions, or somebody that the opposite end can make assumptions about somebody that looks fit and it looks attractive. For example, it's like you see somebody that's really gorgeous on, say, like a sports magazine cover. You can make assumptions that that woman's probably dumber than bricks and she's made out of 50% plastic and all this other negative shit. But it's both ways. Either way, it's like it's looking into a mirror, and both parties are making negative assumptions about themselves because they want to demonize the other because they feel that the other is demonizing them. So it's really a consideration to think that we just need to stop assuming people that we're looking at from our end are making negative impressions on us or making negative assumptions. And part of that can stem that the process of even making these judgments on people is to just don't judge other people. I'm not going to walk up to somebody that I don't know and just make a negative comment about their shoes or something because, like, the shoes are out of style or whatnot. No. If I'm going to be interacting with anybody, I want to be positive. Unless they're flat out being negative to me, in which case it's their game. But we need to actually start thinking about what kind of energy, what kind of impressions we're sending out in the world. If someone's cussing a lot and just being really negative and pessimistic, then they're not going to generally they're probably already making negative views about people, but they're probably not going to have very positive things to say about themselves. And I remember in my last video I was talking about you really need to start, this is like a good stage to start that I started at that really helped me, is that you need to take a piece of paper and draw a line through the middle of it and make one side stuff that you like about yourself and one side negative side. Now, you guys can determine what you want to do first, which one's easier. If you're looking at the positive side of the page and you honestly can't think of anything nice to say about yourself, write some negative stuff on the other side. But then I want you to limit that. I don't want you to just go to like 20 negative words about yourself. I want you to maybe write 1 or 2, 3 at most, and then I want you to walk over to the mirror or think of something, or just something positive about you, whether it is about your appearance or not. If it's about your personality or about your hobbies. We get so desensitized about things in our day-to-day life that we forget how awesome we are as individuals. For example, I don't want to be tooting my own horn, but I've been in college for so long, going to school for zoology and marine biology, and being a scientific diver, that I am self-conscious about applying for jobs, and that's a horrible thing to think about, that I'm scared that I'm not going to be able to find work, when in fact, I tell people ask me what I do, or what I'm going to school for, and I tell them this, and they just look at me wide like, oh my god, it's so awesome, and I'm just like, yeah, whatever, because it's just you're desensitized by things in your life, and whether or not you do motocross or whatever, you may not think it's that awesome because you're just so used to it, but other people don't do that stuff. And just little things. And so I'm trying not to ramble the best I can, but the way I see the word fat in terms of how it's kind of developed through society, that it was easy satire in the early human history, because it was easy to demonize people in the upper class because they were well-to-do and were able to take care of themselves. And so, and of course, people just antagonize that because a lot of the majority of people during that time were not in nobility or high-standing places. And being fat was one of the things that they just really bundled up in there with demonizing upper classes. And it's just kind of piled on through the ages that way. If you let stupid people, or that they started looking at rich people as really snobby, really gluttonous, really lazy, really stupid, and just started placing all of these characters on top of this image. and it's just evolved over the centuries. And in today's world, it's like a lot of those original stereotypes are used a lot in our media, whether or not we even were aware of them or not, as growing up as children. Like, the perfect example is Disney. Early Disney films, if you were fat, you were probably evil, or if you were fat, yeah, you probably meant ill will, were just really mean and horrible to the main character. Or even if you're old, you're probably gonna. It's like all these stereotypes that we saw when we were kids. It lives within us subconsciously, and it's like, my favorite character, as bad as it sounds, is Ursula, and it was just because she was so fabulous and so outgoing. And granted, she was designed after drag queen, but I don't care. I'll dress up like Ursula for Halloween. Screw you guys. I'll be fabulous, sexy Ursula. I just don't know how I'd quite get her hair to work unless I wore a wig. The tentacles also would be another issue. And I'm going to just end this note summing up that we, as a society, really need to just stop expecting all this negative turmoil to come pouring out every time we step out of the house or put ourselves out there, and really need to break these stereotypes. I'm not going to go into any interview thinking that my size is going to make them discriminate against me. I'm going to go in there with a smile on my face, and if they are questioning the idea that I am not capable of doing something, I'm going to ask, like, you guys can put me through a swim test, and if I can't survive the swim test or your guys' test, then clearly I'm not capable of working and being able to do what you guys need me to do for the job. And I'm going to prove myself if they think otherwise. And then that way they won't have to discriminate against someone else of my stature or bigger in the future. So although it may not seem like immediately in the world, put out positive energy, say nice things to people, and you shall receive nice things in return. Unless you live someplace where people are just obnoxiously rude and disrespectful, in which case you can make them confused by just returning with a smile. It's like, thanks, and just walk away, and they'll be freaked out for the next 48 hours thinking someone's following them. Oh, all joking aside, I love you guys. If you guys have any questions, comments, video recommendations, whatever, just please comment below, like the video, share, get me going on more topics. Love you guys. Mwah. Bye.